Dear students, today's module is on advocacy. The learning outcomes. After studying this module, you will be able to understand the basic concept and context of advocacy, analyze the relevance of advocacy in social work and social action practice, and evaluate the role of advocacy in social change and development. To start with the introduction, social workers often work with people who are disempowered and disenfranchised. A core aspect of their role should therefore be to understand people's need and work with and on their behalf to help them achieve the best possible outcomes. Advocacy is a crucial part of this process. It is about taking action to help people say what they want, secure their rights, represent their interests, and obtain services they need. Advocacy supports a variety of methods through which service user needs can be expressed, and this includes self-advocacy, where individuals are empowered to speak for themselves; group advocacy, where people who share a common experience work together to bring about change; and citizen advocacy, where a paid advocate or befriender speaks up on behalf of an individual. These can contribute to the change in many levels: for the individual, a defined group, and more structurally, impacting on policy, legislations, and upholding of the basic human rights. Advocacy can take many forms, but mainly it can be divided into two broad types: people who take action for themselves as individuals, or groups or volunteers or paid professionals speaking up on the behalf of others who are unable to do so through difficulties in communication, capacity, discrimination, or powerlessness. The key aspects of advocacy that relate to social work practice are self-advocacy, the role of independent advocates, and social workers as advocate. Advocacy is seen as one of the key roles of social worker, and social workers are expected to challenge and lobby services in order to ensure fair access and treatment. Social workers are often state officials and must take into account their statutory obligations, budgetary and organizational policies, procedural guidance, and their code of practice. All of these may constrain their ability to fully advocate on behalf of the person they are working with. Advocacy is taking action to help people say what they want, secure their rights, represent their interests, and obtain services they needed. Looking at the definitions of advocacy, David Brandon defines advocacy involves a person's either a vulnerable individual or group or their agreed representative effectively pressing their case with influential others about situations which either affect them directly or, more usually, trying to prevent proposed changes which will leave them worse off. Both the intent and the outcome of such advocacy should be to increase the individual's sense of power, help them to feel more confident, to become more assertive, and gain increased choices. Another definition of social work advocacy is the exclusive and mutual representation of clients or a cause in a forum attempting to systematically influence decision making in an unjust or unresponsive system. Advocacy can be described as a process of identifying with or representing a person's view or concerns in order to ensure enhanced rights and entitlements undertaken by someone who has little or no conflict of interest. This was said by Henderson and Pochin in 2001. Advocacy is a pursuit of influencing outcomes, including public policy and resources allocation decisions within political, economic, and social systems and institutions. They directly affect people's current lives. Therefore, advocacy can be a deliberate process of speaking out on the issues of concern in order to exert some influence on behalf of ideas or persons. In short, advocacy means action directed at changing the policies, positions, or programs of any type of institution, a pleading for defending or recommending an idea before other people, speaking up, drawing a community attention or an important issue and directing decision makers towards a solution, working with other people and organizations to make difference, putting a problem on the agenda, providing a solution to that problem or building support for acting on both the problem and solution. Aim to change an organization internally or to alter an entire system, involve many specific short term activities to reach a long term vision of change, consisting of different strategies aimed at influencing decision making at the organizational, local, provincial, national and international levels, including strategies like lobbying, social marketing, information, education and communication, community organizing and many other tactics. The process of participating in decision making processes that affect their lives. Models of advocacy. Prior to considering what works, it is important to establish the key models of advocacy identified within the literature. What follows is an overview of each model and the associated key features. They are mainly categorized into four. They are self-advocacy. Individuals represent and speak up for themselves with support either individually or collectively. This support can be in a paid or unpaid form. Key features include outward facing model aimed at securing services and support for the individual, focus on ensuring the person's voice is heard, promotes confidence, skills and knowledge and protection of individuals' rights. Second is peer advocacy. The advocate and the person have a common background. For example, they may have shared experience of service provision, that is, experts by experience. Peer advocacy can be conducted on an individual or collective basis and often develop spontaneously. For example, in care homes or daycare centers. Key features include focused on common problem solving, lessens the imbalance of power between the advocate and their advocacy partner as they have shared experiences. Most effectively used with specific groups, for example, people with substance abuse problems and mental health problems, as they can prefer advocates with similar experiences. Third is volunteer citizen advocacy. Volunteer citizen advocacy involves volunteers, those are unpaid, who are recruited, trained and matched with an individual, generally only one at a time. It involves a one-to-one relationship over an extended period and goes beyond befriending. The volunteer represents the views of a person. The partnership is independent, supported, but not influenced by the advocacy organization. Key features: the relationship between the advocate and the individual, that is the partner, is viewed as an outcome in or of itself. The relationship continues regardless of any presenting issue. Citizen advocates are supposed to use their own networks as well as community organizations to support them to develop their social networks. The fourth kind of advocacy is independent professional advocacy. It is a partnership between a paid advocate and a person who accesses support. The advocate provides support, information and representation with the aim of empowering their partner and enabling them to express their needs and choices. This type of advocacy can be undertaken on a short term or a long term basis. Long term advocacy work may be required due to changing needs over the time and the complexity of issues. For example, with parents with learning disabilities involved in the child protection system. Key features include separation from other forms of direct services provision like social work, independent governance, independent funding arrangements, that is, services are not directly funded by public bodies, but via other direct means such as pooled budgets, free from conflict of interest, individual rather than group advocacy, support often provided on a specialist basis, that is capacity, treatment for mental disorder, child protection issues, or for specific groups, example families and caretakers. The fifth kind of advocacy is non-structured advocacy. Advocacy can be provided to those who are, for reason of capacity, unable to personally instruct their advocate. This may be because of the person's limitation in grasping concepts or because they are unable to make others understand their wishes because of significant communication barriers. Capacity to instruct or understand can be diminished for a number of reasons, for example, mental health problems, dementia, acquired brain injury or learning disabilities. However, it should be noted that having one of these conditions does not automatically mean a person lacks capacity. An advocate will observe the partner and their situation, look for alternative means of communication with the partner, gather information from significant others in partner's life, if appropriate, and ensure the partner's rights are upheld. Key features include a focus on upholding the person's rights, ensuring fair and equal treatment and access to services, making certain that decisions are taken with consideration for the individual's unique preferences and perspectives, using as a last resort only when all other attempts at communicating and understanding adult wishes have failed, trying out a range of methods of communication to ensure the person's wishes are clear, using a number of core qualities of life domains together with relevant legislation to make comparisons and consider what quality of life and experiences would be usual and acceptable to the general population. Looking at the forms of advocacy, there are several forms of advocacy. There are several forms which each represent a different approach in the way change is brought into the society, and most popular form is social justice advocacy. Although it is true, the definition does not encompass the notions of power relations, people's participation, and a vision of a just society that promoted by social justice advocates. For them, advocacy represents the series of actions taken and issues highlighted to change the what is into a what should be, considering that this what should be is a more decent and more just society. Those actions which vary with the political, economical and social environment in which they are conducted have several points in common. They are: question in the way policy administered, participate in the agenda setting as they raise significant issues, target political systems because these systems are not responding to people's needs, are inclusive and engaging, purpose policy solutions, and open up space for public argumentation. Some of the other forms of advocacy include ideological advocacy. In this approach, groups fight, sometimes during protests, to advance their idea in the decision-making circles. Mass advocacy is any type of action taken by large groups like petitions, demonstrations, etc. Interest group advocacy: lobbying is the main tool used by interest groups doing mass advocacy. It is a form of action that does not always succeed at influencing political decision makers as it requires resources and organizations to be effective. Bureaucratic advocacy: people considered as experts have more chance to succeed at presenting their issues to decision makers. They use bureaucratic advocacy to influence the agenda, however, at a slower pace. Legislative advocacy. Legislative advocacy is a reliance on the state or federal legislative process as a part of strategy to create change. Media advocacy is a strategic use of mass media as a resource to advance a social or public policy initiative. Public insurance campaigns illustrate how media advocacy was used to fight alcohol and tobacco related health issues. Advocacy groups. Now we come to understand what are advocacy groups. Advocacy is led by advocates, or when they are organized in groups, as is the case most of the time advocacy groups. Advocacy groups are different from political parties, which seek to influence government policy by governing. They are any organization that seeks to influence government policy, but not to govern. This definition includes social movements, sometimes network of organizations that are also focused on encouraging social change. Social movements try to either influence governments or, like the environmental movement, to influence people's ideas or actions. Today, advocacy groups contribute to democracy in many ways. They have 5 key functions of advocacy groups. Standards for advocacy services. In order to ensure that advocacy services are provided in a way that effectively meet the need of people who access support and operate in a way that is underpinned by an evidence base, standards of generic advocacy services have been developed by action of advocacy. These standards relate to supporting advocates, equal opportunity, empowerment, putting people first, clarity of purpose, independence, and confidentiality and complaints. These themes are further reflected in the Scottish Independent Advocacy Alliance and principles of standards of independent advocacy. Advocacy as a tool of social action. Advocacy in social action is pleading and fighting for the service of the client, whom the service system rejected by using the agency's services. Before engaging in advocacy, a worker must be sure that the client desires the worker to intervene. The client should clearly understand the risk involved and the worker should motivate to use the services. Social action advocacy is exclusive and mutually representing the client or the cause in a forum, attempting to systematically influence decision making in an unjust or unresponsive system. Advocacy is identified as a professional tool of social action. Components of advocacy in social action and social work. The 5 key component advocacies in social action are: number 1, cause. Whether advocacy is done on behalf of an individual or population, there is always a party or cause that is to be the beneficiary of advocacy efforts. Outcome. Advocacy efforts are done in order to bring about some change in the status of the beneficiary from being able to receive benefits in the event of case advocacy to changing policies or state and national levels in the event of policy advocacy. Target audience. Given the party that is being advocated on behalf of it not considered as being able to bring about these changes in outcomes on their own, advocacy efforts are directed towards specific parties who are considered as able to bringing about these changes in outcomes. This can entail a caseworker at a local social service agency helping a client to access services in the United States. Congress passing new law on the provision of services to a certain population. Fourth is strategies and tactics. This consists of the plans and activities that the advocating entity will engage into, hopefully influence the target audience and bring about the desired outcomes. Then last is the evaluation. This component has typically not been highlighted in the advocacy literature as McNutt noted. Yet without this component, the advocating entity will be flying blind in terms of having formative and summative feedback about their advocacy efforts. Strategies used for advocacy in social action. The word strategy comes from the Greek word strategia. It is a broad plan for achieving an end. Often citizens and their organizations use a combination of several different strategies to achieve their advocacy goals. These advocacy and empowerment strategies are classified into 6 categories based on their main purpose or core activity. They are number 1, building the constituency for change. Main purpose is to raise political awareness, organize and mobilize those directly affected by the problem, issue and who are interested in it to get involved and take action. Second is cooperation strategies. Main purpose is to build collaboration between community groups, the state and business sectors to disseminate innovations, provide state services and improve local infrastructure. Education strategies. Main purpose is to educate and raise critical consciousness by providing information and encouraging analysis for the development of policy alternatives involving strengthening citizens' capacity to raise their voices and to collaborate in the gathering of data to use as evidence to build the case for change. Fourth is persuasion strategies. Main purpose is to use information, analysis and citizens mobilization to press for change. Often involves lobbying and use of mass media and new media to influence policy makers and public opinion and create the momentum for change. Strong communication and negotiation skills are the key to success for using the strategy. Fifth is litigation strategies. Main purpose is to promote social and economic change by using the court system to test and challenge unfair laws and institutions. Sixth is confrontation strategies. The main purpose is to use direct action to challenge and draw attention to negative policy impacts and to bring greater pressure on political change than on other strategies. This can involve non-violent or violent approaches to direct action. Tactics used for advocacy in social action. Tactics are the immediate steps or activities pursued to achieve objective. Some of the advocacy tactics used in social action are conscientization and awareness campaigns using popular theatre, puppets, songs, etc. Lobbying to influence policymakers or for legislative change, civil disobedience to promote court action to challenge existing laws, networking and coalition building, cooperation between public and private sector institutions and other civil society groups, mass media events, press conferences, news release, editorial mailings, coordinated national international actions, global marches, non-violent direct action involving demonstrations, sittings, information pickets, hunger strikes, padyatras, that is foot marches, etc. Virtual activism through ICTs, e-petitions, virtual sit-ins, e-actions, e-conferences, participatory social action, participatory social research, public awareness workshops, conferences, public hearing, voter registration, model projects and pilot programs, letter writing to editors, decision makers and policy makers, filling petitions, consumer and other economic boycotts, eco-terrorism and many more. To summarize, social action as a practice is not nascent in India. The tradition of influencing public policy for eradicating social evil goes back to the 19th century reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy. The legacy of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Mahatma Gandhi, Periyar and Ambedkar gives a significant insight into the indigenous and effective advocacy methods practiced. In India, there have been several social action efforts on issues related to environment degradation, rights of Dalits and tribes, women rights, civil rights, nuclear installation, alienation of tribes, unorganized working sector, drug and forest policies, etc. In some of the ongoing campaigns like Save Narmada movement, grassroots mobilization was combined with other advocacy strategies such as activating global pressure through international advocacy groups and development lobbies.